Welcome back, Ascenders, to the Ascended Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Mystic Rain. So, listen, this is, I think, probably going to be a little bit of a heavier episode, but we need to talk about it. We need to talk about this subject because I honestly actually think that it's like a massive reflection in today's collective consciousness. And I think it's also an opportunity if we collectively decide that we would like to shift, right? So, what has just happened? There is a shooting, a school shooting in Wisconsin, right? 15-year-old girl went in, shut up the school, killed a bunch of people, then killed herself, right? We know this story. It happens all of the time. And I think that when there's a tragedy like this, like we have to reflect as a society, what is it that we are missing or what is it that we are choosing repeatedly not to see? And when violence erupts from young people, is that a signal that something deeper is brewing beneath the surface? And when are we going to reach a point where we collectively decide that that something is something that we can no longer ignore? This week, there was a devastating school shooting occurred at the Abundant Life Christian School, and the name of the school itself is incredibly ironic. In Madison, Wisconsin, and it involved a 15-year-old female student. And the incident shocked people, the nation, I guess, because not that violence isn't shocking enough, but I guess because it was a female shooter, and people see that female shooters are exceedingly rare. And the few that they have a record of, there is also like a gender identity play involved in that, in the sense of like the few female shooters that are on record actually identified as male or being a man. They didn't identify with being a girl. So there's also some dynamics that are happening there. But I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to explore like deeper societal concerns that led to this event, the state of like youth mental health, overlooked warning signs, and just like the lack of spiritual and emotional tools that exist in society to navigate things like modern pressure, right? And then there are critics, right? There are critics that are arguing that schools and communities continue to fail in identifying and addressing mental health crisis in students, which check, I'm part of that the group of critics, I guess, and that the incidents highlights like a failure in emotional and societal systems that definitely need to be addressed. And I think that this tragedy forces us to ask, like, what shifts do we need in our schools? What shifts do we need in our homes? And what shifts do we need in our communities to foster things like emotional safety and spiritual growth for the next generation? Because truth of the matter is, like, this story is actually a mirror. It's not just a story about one triple teen. It's a mirror that is reflecting how disconnected the society has actually become, how disconnected society has become from emotions, from spiritual foundations, from each other. And I think it's a wake up call for us to ask things like, are we listening to the cries for helps that are coming out of those around us, right? And I think if you want to zoom out and look at it from a broader perspective, right, is looking at like the pressures that young people face today, which are being amplified by social media and societal expectations, is being amplified by the fact that young people are not protected on social media. I know that like all of my safety settings are turned on for my personal social media accounts, and the things that manage to make it through to my feed are absolutely appalling to me. And there's nothing that I can do to stop or prevent it. So if that is my experience as an adult, what is the experience of all of our young people out there in the world today? I think that how the breakdown of community and mental health support systems exacerbates these issues. We don't have a sense of community anymore. Due to society and societal expectations, we have been separated from our communities and people that would have traditionally kept us safe, right? The tribes, the clans, the groups, they no longer exist. And then I think that, like, when it comes to female shooters, they're saying that that is super rare, but I think it also symbolized like an overlooked space where there's probably rage and there's probably sadness and there's probably hopelessness that are intersecting, and we're just completely ignoring it because we're like, oh, well, there aren't any of those. Because honestly, like, if we're going to be real, like, young people today, it's very much a different climate. When I grew up, I can do dumb shit and it not be on the internet, right? Also, because I grew up in a time where I know a time pre-internet, not that the internet didn't exist, I am a millennial, the internet existed, but we didn't necessarily use it in the way that we used it before. It was only used when you needed to use it, but you could very easily go days without ever touching the internet, right? And so, whereas like that's not the case for today's kids, right? And so, like, when I was 15 years old, even, and in 15, the internet was actually starting to be popping. When I was 15 years old, my biggest issue was like whether or not my crush liked me back. It wasn't like picking up a weapon or being concerned that the kids around me were picking up weapons. And I feel like this makes you wonder, like, what changed for today's kids? What is a common denominator? Social media being a massive, massive, massive part of that. And but what are their other pressures? What are the things that are offering compounding effects to this, right? Because our society lacks emotional tools, it lacks spiritual wisdom for processing pain, it lacks spiritual leaders to lead people through processing of their pain, right? The processing of their grief, the processing of their anger. When kids feel unseen or unheard, disconnection grows, right? And so we must ask ourselves, are we nurturing connection in our homes, in our schools? Are we leaving kids to struggle by themselves? Are we just, as adults, really poor support systems? And I think that, like, why are we not in a space where we're like, let's actually try to identify some signs, let's look out for some signs? Because spiritually, everything manifests itself on the outside. And when it's neglected on the inside, then what manifests on the outside just becomes bigger and it just becomes larger, right? Like, the shooting is a culmination of like unseen or unaddressed internal issues, right? Things that were just left alone that nobody dealt with. And I think this is like a call to action for everybody else, another call of action, because collectively as a society, we keep missing and ignoring our calls to action to check in with like the young people in our life. And we should be doing this week. Ask them how they're feeling. Like, not just about school, but about their dreams. Ask them about their dreams. Ask them about their fears, right? Their insecurities. Ask them about their world. Ask them about themselves. Help them feel connected to a world where so many people feel disconnected from. Because here's the thing, with social media hasn't, as much as it has done for helping people to connect to each other, it has done just the same amount or more as disconnecting people from each other, right? So just ask them about like their world. What does their world look like? Do you even know? When it comes to like the kids in your life, the teens in your life, do you even know like what their world looks like? Because we are all a part of a collective energy, and that collective energy is what creates the society, right? And by shifting our own perspectives on mental health, on connection, on things like care, then we start the process of beginning to heal our communities. And people say, "Well, I'm just one person." You're right. So, but you can do the job of one person. Like, I'm not asking you to do the job of the world. You can do the job of one person, right? And through you doing the job of one person, you will then convince or inspire other people to do their job. And that is how you get collective change. And that is how you get a collective shift, because healing does begin with you, right? Your healing will ripple outwards, right? Your good deeds will ripple outwards. And what energy are you sending into the collective today? Because I think we all can recognize that this is a collective problem. And I think a lot of people share the same sentiment of like, why is no one doing anything? So this is me doing my part, right? Now, where is your part? You can also jump in on this collective bandwagon. And then I also too want to bring it back to you specifically. Like, where in your life are you holding back? Where in your life are you holding back from connecting with others, with yourself? Where are you holding back from connecting with yourself? Um, are there any warning signs, like in your relationships and your friendships and your family that you may be overlooking? There's probably tons of warning signs in your family. A lot of people have families where there's one person that looks like they're 2 seconds from jumping off the deep end, and everyone's just like, well, I hope they hang on, right? Like, where in your own life are you holding back from connecting? And then I'm going to ask that this week you reach out to one person. Reach out to one person, your child, a sibling, a friend, and then create that safe space for them to talk. Ask them about their world. Even as simple like, how are you really feeling? Not how are you? Because when you say how are you, people go, I'm good. I'm fine. And then when you get that answer for them, when you get that response, then like turn around and be like, no, no, no. But like really, like how are you really feeling? Right? This can open up like a door for connection. And in a period of time where we are so disconnected, we want to be opening doors for connection. Like, the tragedy is super heavy. Those children are never going to get over that. But we currently live in a society where things are happening to children and they're never going to get out of it. So what are we going to do collectively in order to change it? What are we going to do collectively in order to at least change the ones that are close to us? Because we can't change it for the world. But the ones that are close to us, we have a hand in that. And so what are we going to do about that?